Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, as North Korea threatens a new form of nuclear test, Seoul and Washington warn it would be a violation of UN resolutions and there would be consequences. South Korea posts a current account surplus for the 24th straight month in February. The country's surplus last year was the second highest among G20 nations in terms of its size to GDP. Plus, the foreign ministers of the United States and Russia agree on the need for a diplomatic solution to the crisis in Ukraine. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Ju in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime, responding to North Korea's threat that it will conduct a new form of nuclear test. South Korea says the North would pay the price if it neglects demands from the international community.
Washington is also urging Pyongyang to refrain from any actions that can threaten regional security. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
South Korea has condemned North Korea for its latest threats of a fourth nuclear test, saying the regime will face severe consequences for its actions. In a statement, Seoul's foreign ministry warned North Korea to keep in mind that it will pay the price if it neglects the grave demands from its neighbors and the international community and pushes ahead with another nuclear test. The United States also urged North Korea to refrain from disturbing regional peace and security. An official at the U.S. State Department said any nuclear tests or ballistic missile launches are a grave violation of UN Security Council resolutions and said such actions will only further isolate Pyongyang. North Korea raised tensions Sunday by threatening to conduct a new type of nuclear test.
We would not rule out a new form of nuclear test for bolstering our nuclear deterrence.
The threats came in response to a UN condemnation of North Korea's medium-range Nodong ballistic missile launches last week. It was the first firing in 4 years of mid-range missiles, following a series of short-range rocket launches over the past 2 months. According to 38 North, a website run by the U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University, recent satellite imagery shows mountains north and south of North Korea's Punggye-ri test site have been excavated into complexes that could allow multiple tests. Joel Witt, a former State Department official and editor of the 38 North website, said there are no immediate signs of a fourth nuclear test, but added North Korea will be capable of carrying out a test within 4 to 6 weeks once it decides to do so. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, Seoul's Unification Ministry also said in a press briefing Monday morning that while North Korea is capable of conducting a nuclear test and firing long-range missiles, it sees no imminent signs of a fourth nuclear test or a missile launch. Now, experts are busy interpreting what North Korea means by a new form of nuclear test. While some say Pyongyang could be making an exaggerated threat to use it as a bargaining chip for negotiations, others speculate the North may have finished the process of miniaturizing its nuclear warheads. Kim Min-ji has the details.
Experts have given 3 possible scenarios for what North Korea means by new form of nuclear test. Pyongyang on Sunday threatened to carry out a new form of test over the UN Security Council's rebuke of its recent ballistic missile launches. First, experts say the North statement can mean that it will carry out nuclear tests at any possible site, whether that be land, air, or underwater, as well as its usual underground facilities. However, considering the dangers such as radioactive fallout as well as condemnation from the international community, that scenario doesn't look likely. Another possible interpretation is using uranium bombs. So far, Pyongyang is believed to have used plutonium-based bombs in its nuclear test, but this new form of nuclear test could mean it will use uranium in the future.
We can say there are possibilities North Korea will carry out a nuclear test using uranium if their uranium enrichment program has been successful.
Although lighter than plutonium, uranium is considered much more powerful. However, others point out that it can mean the North has completed the miniaturization process of its nuclear warheads. Last year, the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency also said it believed Pyongyang was now able to miniaturize its warheads to mount its ballistic missiles. What's worse is that the North has already completed preparations for another nuclear test.
North Korea is prepared for an underground nuclear test at the Punggye-ri site. However, there are no imminent signs that they will carry out the test.
Attention is now on whether North Korea is using the new form as a bargaining chip for negotiations or whether it will really carry out a new form of test. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Amid its renewed threats, North Korea has notified South Korea that it will carry out a live-fire drill on Monday near the disputed inter-Korean maritime border. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff says the North sent a fax to the South Korean Navy this morning, announcing the exercises in 7 West Sea border regions north of the northern limit line. It did not give a specific time for this planned exercise, but demanded that Seoul keep its vessels out of the training zone. Seoul's defense ministry said the North's intentions may be hostile and that is keeping a close watch for possible clashes. Washington has reportedly given its first positive response toward delaying the transfer of wartime operational control to South Korea from the end of 2015. South Korea's Korean Broadcasting System, or KBS, reported Monday that the U.S. may make its decision official during President Barack Obama's visit to Seoul next month. The report says the positive outlook stems from a constructive meeting between the two countries' top military officers in Washington earlier this month. However, South Korea's defense ministry declined to comment on the report. Seoul wants the transfer pushed back from the current scheduled date of December 2015, citing the ongoing and unpredictable threat posed by North Korea.
North Korea and Japan's first government-level talks in more than a year got off to a bumpy start Sunday amid differences over a range of bilateral issues. Report out of Beijing, where the talks are taking place, say officials from the two sides spent hours simply trying to agree on what they should talk about. Tokyo reportedly demanded an investigation into the whereabouts of hundreds of Japanese nationals thought to have been abducted by Pyongyang in the 1970s and 80s. Pyongyang wants Japan to relax sanctions imposed on the North after its 2006 long-range missile test. The Japanese side also lightly protested North Korea's recent provocations, including its threat on Sunday to carry out a new form of nuclear test. The talks continue this Monday. And South Korea and Japan are supposed to be holding ministerial-level talks in April in a bid to improve their ties, strained over a number of historical issues. But there's rising speculation the meeting might not take place at all, as the two sides can't work out an agenda. Connie Kim reports.
Korea and Japan aren't seeing eye to eye on the agenda for ministerial-level talks scheduled for April, and new reports suggest they may not meet at all. A foreign ministry official from Seoul reaffirmed on Sunday that the discussions would focus solely on the women who were forced by the Japanese military to work as sex slaves during the Second World War. That runs counter to what a Japanese foreign ministry official told the press Friday. The official said the talks should not only center on the comfort woman issue, but also on other points of contention between the two countries. Chief Secretary Yoshihide Suga said Thursday that discussions should also include his government's claims over Korea-controlled Dokdo Island. If the two countries fail to sit down at the negotiating table in April, it's expected to have a further effect on bilateral relations. Tokyo proposed a ministerial-level talks to Seoul as a concession ahead of its trilateral summit with Korea and the United States last week. Korea's efforts to raise awareness of the comfort woman issue continues on an unofficial level. The House of Sharing, a shelter for former sex slaves, said it has invited Japan's First Lady Akie Abe for a visit. The proposal was made in mid-March during a meeting with Japanese diplomats. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The Korean government is working tirelessly to put President Park Geun-hye's deregulation plans into motion. The finance ministry is fast-tracking the procedure for getting a revised bill into the hands of lawmakers. Our Kwon So-hwa has the details.
The government wants a quicker and more direct route toward deregulation, and they're doing all they can to make it happen. A high-level official at the Ministry of Strategy and Finance said Monday that the timing and speed at which deregulation takes place is important, and for that reason the ministry is working with the Ministry of Justice and other related offices to speed up the process. Ministries are typically required 40 days prior notice that they will be proposing a revised bill, with another 20 days tacked on for screening by legislative bodies and the Regulatory Reform Committee. But the Finance Ministry is working to cut that 60-day time frame in half to 30. Similar deregulation plans were also been mentioned by the Transport Ministry last week when it announced that individuals and businesses would be allowed to transition commercial trucks into food trucks. This came less than a week after President Park pledged to reduce the volume of regulations by 20% of the current level by 2016. It's a plan of a 3-year economic innovation plan which intends to revitalize investment and ultimately create more jobs. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju with 12.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
Korea posted a current account surplus for the 24th straight month in February as trade gains widened and the service account deficit fell. Hwang Jie has the details.
Korea's central bank said Monday that the nation posted a current account surplus of over $4.5 billion last month. That's up over $1 billion from January and more than double from February of last year. Exports of goods rose over 7% from the previous year to $48 billion, while imports edged up slightly more than 1% to $42.6 billion. When asked if the surplus was coming from the nation's sluggish domestic demand, officials at the central bank attributed subdued imports to stable global commodities prices. The deficit in the service account, which includes tourism and shipping, also fell, helping the nation log a current account surplus for the 24th straight month. It posted a deficit of around $1.5 billion last month, compared with a shortfall of nearly $2 billion in January. The current account data was released based on a new international standard. Under the new standard, last year's current account surplus widened to $79.8 billion, up around $9 billion from the previous data. The central bank said last year's surplus accounted for 6% of the nation's gross domestic product. The nation's current account surplus has been acting as a buffer for Korea since the U.S. Federal Reserve has been scaling back its massive bond-buying stimulus program. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
In an eye-opening sign of how much the Korean economy relies on its two biggest companies, new data shows the combined revenue of Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor accounts for more than 1/5 of the country's total GDP. Figures from Korea's central bank and the nation's financial watchdog on Monday show the consolidated revenue of the two firms logged 316 trillion won last year, which is some $300 billion. That's equivalent to 22% of Korea's nominal GDP, with Samsung Electronics accounting for 16% and Hyundai Motor 6%. The portion of their revenue to GDP has been on the rise from a combined 17% 4 years ago. The two companies also tops market capitalization, with the two put together standing at a staggering 90% of the Korean bourse. Two Samsung Group companies are merging. The deal announced Monday has Samsung SDI, the group's unit in charge of developing battery technologies, acquiring the group's textile firm, Seoul Industries. The merger will be finalized in July, and when that's done, Samsung SDI will be one of the conglomerate's biggest business units, with market capitalization of 10 trillion won, or $9.3 billion, and assets worth $14 billion. Samsung SDI has been developing display and parts technologies with a new emphasis on batteries since the year 2002. Jade Industries, meanwhile, has been involved in the fashion, chemical, and electronic material industries since being founded in 1954.
No deal. After 4 hours of talks, the top American and Russian diplomats agreed on just one thing, that the crisis in Ukraine requires a diplomatic solution. They agreed on little else. Ji Myung-gil reports.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov discussed ways to resolve the Ukraine crisis during talks in Paris on Sunday. But the two men parted ways without any agreement in place.
In a frank conversation this evening with Foreign Minister Lavrov, I made clear that the United States still considers the Russian actions to be illegal and illegitimate, and Russia's actions over the past several weeks have placed it at odds, obviously, with the rule of law and the international community.
After 4 hours of talks, both sides recognized the importance of finding a diplomatic solution that meets the needs of the Ukrainian people. But they agreed on little else. Lavrov repeated that Russia has no plans to invade Ukraine and said he and Kerry had discussed setting up a neutral federal government in Ukraine.
All political forces in Ukraine will have an equal voice and can agree on which kind of concrete political, economic, financial, social, religious traditions will be respected in different parts of the country so that it becomes united and represents all the values of the Ukrainian people.
Ukrainian officials are hesitant to decentralize power. They fear that doing so would give more power to pro-Russia regions, something that could harm its aspirations to be a greater part of Europe and potentially tear the country apart. The Kerry-Lavrov meeting in Paris came days before NATO foreign ministers meet in Brussels on Tuesday and Wednesday, where talks are likely to center on Russia and its actions in Crimea and Ukraine. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Korean scientists have developed a wearable patch that uses the latest nanotechnology to monitor, store data, and even deliver drugs to patients. The groundbreaking research could help treat sufferers of movement disorders like Parkinson's disease. Park Ji-won has the details.
It looks like a simple Band-Aid that can be easily adapted to a patient's skin, but it is much more complex than that. Thanks to nanotechnology, this flexible plaster can monitor patients' muscle activity and store information on their movements. After analyzing the data, it finally delivers the drugs via the skin.
This technology is important as it has established a systematic connection from monitoring and storing medical information like a patient's movements to delivering drugs after analyzing the data.
As this thin adhesive plaster can be stretched to allow for patients' movements, the patch could be a significant breakthrough in the treatment of movement disorder diseases like Parkinson's.
Temperature sensors or other biosensors can easily be added onto this on-the-skin device. It can also be used for multifunctional purposes in the prevention and treatment of diseases by effectively monitoring patients' conditions and delivering drugs in response to the data.
The team also say the patch could be very useful for telemedicine if attached with wireless communication technology. The study was published in the most recent edition of the scientific journal Nature Nanotechnology. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And now for a look at some of the international news we're following at this hour, we're going to join our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the news center. Hi, Eunice.
Hi, guys.
Eunice, let's begin in the United States. We have new information about what General Motors knew before it started recalling hundreds of thousands of cars last month.
Yeah, Jinju, General Motors has been under the microscope for federal regulators for a much delayed response to its faulty ignition switch, a defect linked to 13 deaths. It's an issue GM was aware of as early as 2001, but did not publicly address until February this year, with a recall. That global recall now stands at 2.6 million vehicles. And new information released Sunday via a congressional memo showed the U.S. automaker had approved the faulty ignition switches despite full knowledge that they did not meet the company's specifications for torque performance. The memo cited Delphi Automotive, which supplied the defective ignition switches. GM Chief Executive Mary Barra is set to testify at the first public congressional hearing slated for Tuesday local time to explain what happened. And now, in its fourth week, the search continues for any sign of missing Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. A team of 10 aircrafts and up to 10 ships enter the search zone on this Monday, including the Australian Navy vessel, the Ocean Shield, equipped with devices that can detect signals from the black box flight recorders in a confined area. They'll also try to scoop up 4 orange objects spotted from the air over the weekend that matches the color of the airliner. This as dozens of distraught family members of the missing arrived in Malaysia from China Sunday. The 35-person group has been demanding proof that Flight 370 sunk into the Indian Ocean and an apology from the Malaysian government for giving out confusing information. The Guinea government is struggling to contain the country's deadliest outbreak of the Ebola virus as the death toll caused by the latest epidemic reaches 70. The Guinean Health Ministry said its fatality rate has been at 63% in cases observed since the start of this year. Most had been reported in the southern parts of the country, but the capital of Conakry since last week has reported 8 cases of Ebola, including 1 fatality. Neighboring Senegal has closed its land border as a precaution against the contagion. The tropical virus leads to hemorrhagic fever, vomiting, diarrhea, and in severe cases, organ failure and unstoppable bleeding. In what's widely being seen as a litmus test of sorts, Turkey wrapped local elections on Sunday. Early poll results showed Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan's Justice and Development Party in the lead with nearly 47% of the votes at 70% of the votes counted. Prime Minister Erdogan claimed victory in a midnight speech during which he warned his political enemies they will, quote, pay the price for plotting his downfall. Erdogan is looking to run for the presidency in August when Turkish citizens will directly elect their leader for the first time. Sunday's polls were marred with blood. 8 people were killed and 9 others wounded in clashes between supporters of rival parties.
The unseasonably warm weather isn't just making the flowers bloom earlier than usual. Even blue crabs, which are usually caught in the middle of the April, are being snared by fishermen already. And that underscores just how abnormal this mild weather is. And we can expect to have more of it today. And it will be sunny across the region, and the air quality will be moderate to good throughout the entire nation. So I hope you get to take advantage of nice weather conditions this afternoon. And it looks like the mild and sunny weather is forecast to continue in the first half of this week, with temperatures hovering in the 20s. But things will take turn as we approach the weekend, and spring showers are in store for the later in the week. So do keep that in mind, and let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The afternoon high in Seoul will rise to 21, and Gwangju and Busan should top out at 22 and 19 respectively. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju and Daejeon will peak at 17 and 20, and the top temperature on Mount Keungang will be at 12. Well, that's all I have for you today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.